Right. Right. Well, I'm glad to have you, but yeah, give me 1 minute. I'm just trying to, this video is not loading. Give me 1 second here. I'm so excited for the next Wicked. We're gonna go on Friday. Speaking of Ariana Grande. Oh my gosh, it's so good. She what? What'd you say about Ariana Grande? I don't know. They're intense together. Yeah, my middle child thinks that they have a thing. And I was like, I can see that. Yeah. Dude, and she's got some muscle, Cynthia, right? Right. Seriously. I'm gonna agree with you on that because she like stepped in and was hardcore. Yeah, it was really good. I'm gonna say. Well, I'm glad to have those of you who are here. Yeah, it's weird. This probably has 15 people enrolled in it, and we've been lucky to have like 12 here. 15. I've been teaching this class here for 16 years. I've never had so few people in it. So odd, I don't know, but I'm happy to have those of you who are here. I think we're a great group, and I'm grateful to have you. So
that could be a variety of reasons.
oh, for sure.
Like
could be a million things.
Yeah, like as a matter of fact, like I feel like I kind of have an opposite situation where it's like I feel like one of the reasons why some people are afraid to go to this class is because like, well, the recent presidency saying that might be applying that if that and like some people might be afraid that if they were about like in this class by some more irreparably old people, some bad stuff could happen to them. Like it could be that.
Yeah,
It also could be thinking of like people who have already experienced like people have already experienced like a lot of sexual education or have already kind of been through this class before.
Yeah, it could be a million things, right?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're all here. I'll take it. Did everyone have a good weekend with the rain?
I love it.
I love the rain.
Yeah. It's like I feel like it's more accurate to say it's like I love the ambience of rain. I just don't like being outside when it rains.
Yeah, we have it was frustrating because I love the rain so much, but we have a covered patio on the back half of our house. And somebody enclosed it years ago, but the whole thing flooded on top of it. It's such a mess. But other than that, I love the rain. Right. Kind of a disaster, yeah. There, yeah. Right, it was all plugged up, and it happens when you have a lot of like pets or like a lot of debris. It can be a mess, but I love that I love that it rained. It was nice to have a break too from soccer. It was like everything was canceled. It was like, oh, it's kind of nice to sleep in on Saturday for one weekend. Bless you. So if you're looking at your calendar, right, just to kind of touch on that for a second. So we have today and Wednesday. And then next week is Thanksgiving. So the college doesn't recognize that in terms of like anything beyond Thursday and Friday, which is a shame, as we talked about. But as I've had on there the whole time, I'm taking Monday and Wednesday off. My whole family has the week off. So I've planned for that from the beginning. I will have one assignment for you that I'm going to give you. You can do it either day or whenever next week. It'll be on chapter 11 or chapter 14. I'm sorry, 14. But it'll be on Canvas and you'll just turn it in on Canvas. It'll pop up on Monday next week. That way we don't fall behind for the whole time. But I planned on it the whole time. So just know that is our reality next week. I don't know what your other classes are doing, but that's what we're doing. My whole family has it off. They're like, we're gonna relax. So I just planned for it.
Okay, that's really nice.
Yeah, so I'm encouraging you to take that time for yourself, but that's all up to you. So on Monday and Wednesday next week, we won't have class, but we have today we will talk about just for a second. I want to just talk about the guest speaker, and then we'll talk about 16. We also have 17, which is power and sexual coercion, and then selling sex. So we're definitely getting down to kind of the end, right, of the semester. I graded all of your homework assignments. If you didn't turn in the second homework assignment, remember I accept them 10% off each day. So you can still turn them in late for like up to half credit. So if you didn't do them, please feel free to email them and turn that into me. It was due last week on Wednesday. I graded them all.
Yeah, unfortunately, I also have another like a paper.
Yeah,
and
this is the time.
And it kind of mixed up the due dates.
That's okay. So you can
I
still
kinda-
email them to me for up to half credit. Like, this is the time of year for papers. Right, I know like you probably have a paper and everything, right? So I'm sorry for that. Sorry to add to that, but that is just kind of how it is, right? Before we jump into 16, any kind of general thoughts or reactions to our guest speaker last time? Like it, didn't like it? Between us, I'm not gonna, I should see her like once every like 5 years. So yeah.
I liked it. I just at the first when Joey went, she like walked over and handed him a condom.
Yeah.
Like I did not expect her to go around handing condoms.
Yes, and she ran out. Like all of you were so like talkative. She gave you all her condoms, which I think is fantastic. Yeah, she always brings treats, condoms.
I mean, yeah, like, I mean, it's always good if like someone runs out of treats.
That's right. Whether it's candy or condoms, right? Whatever.
Like, sure, it may suck, but at least on the teacher side, it means they did a really good job.
Good, good. Well, any other like general like pieces of feedback? Helpful, not helpful, interesting? Right? Yeah. Thumbs up. We'll take that. Right. So we talked about some stuff, and then she talked about some stuff, and together that kind of covers that chapter. Important, right? And again, remember that you get those free condoms and free resources here on campus. So I hope you utilize them, even though it's over in Founders Hall instead of in its normal spot. And then what we'll look at today, kind of varieties of sexual expression, talking about what is typical versus atypical, which is a really like massive topic, but we'll look at some of the kind of more common like fetishes or paraphilias that are out there. And then the next chapter, as I said, is like power. We'll talk more about consent, which our guest speaker talked a little bit about, but we'll get into that a little bit more. But chapter 16 is all about like varieties of expression, right? Like what is normal? Right, and this is a tough question, I think, in general, right? Like the class before this is abnormal site, where it's like, how do you define what's normal and abnormal in there? And how do you define what's normal and abnormal in terms of sex, right? This is something that is different from person to person, different from era to era, right? Like, so different times have viewed things in very different ways. And in general, when we're talking about things that are kind of atypical, we sometimes call them paraphilias. We sometimes call them kinks. Like on a like lesser level. Like if somebody has something that's kind of deviating from the norm, it might be just a kink, like a preference that they have. But this isn't easy to kind of determine. Like, how do we decide what's normal versus abnormal? And who even comes up with what's normal, right? So it's a very subjective term. There's an incredible amount of variety from person to person, from relationship to relationship. You might be with somebody and like what's normal in that relationship is not normal in the next, right? Like, so it can vary incredibly from person to person, relationship to relationship, time to time. But when it becomes problematic is when it interferes in something. Like you can't achieve orgasm without a certain item that makes it difficult for you, right, in that way. Or maybe you feel like you need to violate someone's consent in order to achieve like gratification. That's a problem, right? Yeah. So where it becomes problematic is when it is like required in order to achieve like any kind of orgasm. And maybe you feel shame about it. Maybe it's rooted in a trauma response. Maybe it violates someone's consent. So when we're talking about these like paraphilias, we often divide them into two groups. So paraphilia literally means like beside love. So kind of uncommon sexual expression. That's the technical term. The like common term would be a kink for the most part. But we can divide them into two groups. Ones that are non-coercive, which generally aren't problematic, right? And ones that are coercive. So when something is non-coercive, it tends to be a private act or it involves consensual adults. Okay, so this might be where you like somebody to wear a certain kind of lingerie. You like someone to touch your feet before you engage in sex. You masturbate to fantasies of whatever, right? Like it is something that is often either private or between two adults who both agree and are consenting. We're going to talk about BDSM a little bit, right? Which they talked about, the guest speaker talked about a tiny bit too. But that's something that's often incredibly non-coercive, a lot of consent, a lot of agreement and discussions. Non-coercive paraphilias are only a problem if one person is really into it and the other isn't. That's the only time that those tend to interfere. So let's say that your partner has a really intense like foot fetish, right? They need their feet to be stimulated or touched or massaged or something in order to achieve orgasm. And you are grossed out by that and don't want to do that, that could be a problem in your relationship. So sometimes people will masturbate to the thought of that and do their own kind of behavior on their own as a way to get around it. But non-coercive ones, rarely an issue. It's very, just kind of a variant. Again, like more like a kink. But the coercive ones are a problem. That's when it involves something like illegal. It harms somebody. There's no consent involved. Another big part of this, and this piggybacks off consent, maybe the person is not able to give consent because they're too young. Okay, right? They're a minor, or they're like in a state where they're not able to like give their consent or agreement. So coercive paraphilias involve someone who's unwilling, something that might be harmful in some way, they might be illegal. So what we'll do is we'll kind of talk about some of the common ones in each group. No, there are tons of these, but in general, there's kind of common ones that we see popping up over and over again. And one of the most common non-coercive paraphilias, which is where we'll start, are fetishes. When people have a fetish, they have like an intense desire related to either an object or a part of the body. And oftentimes they cannot achieve orgasm or gratification without that being fulfilled. So maybe unless someone's wearing lingerie or they're wearing high heels, or like I mentioned, a foot fetish, right? Or maybe rubber or like silk. It can be an item of clothing or a type of clothing. It could be a part of the body. But the idea with this, bless you, is that you need this object in order to achieve orgasm. And that's where it can become problematic if like your partner isn't into it at the same time as you or in the same way as you. I found a little video and I think you'll see her one more time. But this young woman is like really like a big like YouTuber and talks a lot about like sexual stuff. In this case, fetishes. So let me play this little video for you. She kind of introduces fetishes and some popular ones. So let me bring that up. Oops, pause. Hold on one second. So I'll play this for you. Literally have a fetish of anything. And there's nothing wrong with having a fetish or like a preference, but a fetishistic disorder is when it like gets in the way in some way, right? Where it's causing problems, where like you can't achieve orgasm without it. So a preference is something that most of us have. Like maybe you like certain parts of your body to be touched in order to become aroused or in order to achieve orgasm, or you like when your partner wears a certain article of clothing or does a certain thing. But a fetish or like a fetishistic disorder or issue is when you require it, right? It has to be there in order to achieve orgasm. And so again, they may or may not be problematic, right? A fetish or a preference can be kind of on a spectrum of normality like anything else. Any like comments or thoughts, anything about fetishes, anything here before we go to the next one? Yeah.
This reminds me of one time where my friend and I went on Wikipedia to look at different types of fetishes.
Sure.
And like, there's so many fetishes that I didn't know were a thing. Like, I didn't even know the movies was a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be anything from like,
Literally.
yeah, there was a really popular, like, it was a few years ago. There was like this whole wave of diapers. Diapers was like a big thing. People wearing diapers and like kind of sexualizing the like infant-like nature of sexuality. And that's where you start to kind of get on the line. But mucus, right? Sanitary pads, fire, like bondage, right? Article of clothing. It could be anything. It literally can be anything. All right. One other one, transvestic fetishism. This one's kind of a controversial one. Okay, so different than being, so when someone is like transsexual, they have gone through like an assigned like change in their sex. Transvestic fetishism is different. This is when you derive arousal from wearing the clothing of the other sex. So very different from being an identity thing. This is purely related to arousal. So it has nothing to do with like completeness or identity. It's that you achieve arousal from wearing an item of clothing or like full clothing of the opposite sex. But how are we defining clothing as being of the opposite sex? It gets really blurry and tricky there. The stereotype here might be like a woman wearing like men's boxers and being aroused by it. But then some women wear boxers instead of like wearing the traditional female underwear. So like, again, where do you draw the line? Or like a man wearing like silk, like women's silk underwear as being something that arouses him instead of like wearing a more traditional male underwear, right? So kind of controversial because we tend to think of like someone who is a transvestite as someone who's cross-dressing, but how do we define cross-dressing and where does that blur the line to like identity, right? So one that they often talk about in the DSM and talk about in books, but is a very controversial idea because defining opposite sex clothing isn't easy to do. Some other non-coercive paraphilias, probably one of the more common ones, BDSM or S&M kind of behavior. Okay, so lots of letters here, BDSM. The S&M stand for sadomasochistic or sadism or masochism. The bondage, B stands for bondage, D is discipline, right? So kind of this whole intertwined realm of oftentimes dealing with things related to control, sometimes pain or being like tied up, restricted in some way. So kind of a lot of elements to this. Very, very much made popular by like 50 Shades of Grey, right? The books and the movie, which highlight a lot of stereotypes of this. A lot of stereotypes related to this kind of group of sexual behaviors. I found a little video by a sex therapist who is talking kind of a little bit about this. So I'm going to play it for you. She kind of introduces it and we'll come back to this slide afterward. It's just a couple of minutes and she talks about like it's with BDSM, right? We tend to think of it in a lot of the ways that she mentioned. And as I said, 50 Shades of Grey, and as she said as well, really like popularized some of those. Another movie that was really popular related to this was The Secretary, a little bit older than that. But it also highlighted some of these myths that it's often like trauma-based or people coming out of like childhood trauma or sexual abuse. Not always the case. A lot of people like the control element of this. And so you end up with people who are kind of like dominating and then people who might be more submissive. So you get like dominants and submissives with this. You also get people who are into the sadist side and the masochistic side. So when someone's a sadist, they tend to like enjoy the suffering of another person, right? Or dominating another person, maybe causing pain or control over another person, which could be humiliating them or like literally like confining them or binding them in some way. Can be a lot of different elements. The masochist is the one who likes to be humiliated or bound or controlled or maybe even hurt in some way, right? And so when you get someone who is a sadist and someone a masochist together, you get sadomasochistic behavior. So if you have someone who likes to dominate and likes to restrict and confine and control, and someone who likes having that happen to them, it's a match made in heaven, right? No problems. But if you have someone who likes to be dominated or humiliated or bound, and their partner doesn't like that, that's where it tends to lead to struggles. So again, if you have two people who consent and agree to doing these things with each other, it's not problematic in any way. It can be a very gratifying like relationship. It's when there's that disconnect or you kind of go beyond mutually agreed upon limits that it becomes problematic. Yeah.
There's that one like joking interaction like Gilles Deleuze, the philosopher, came with between like a sadist and sadist because the masochist says hit me, the sadist says no, because he's trying to inflict psychological trauma on the masochist.
Right. Right, because it doesn't have to be physical, right? It could be psychological, right? So you've asked me for something and now I'm denying it, causing you, right, pain or discomfort. But so this can be physical or psychological in nature. A lot of bondage is part of this, right? Hence the B, right? In BDSM, tying people up or restricting them or binding them in some way. And again, it's not an uncommon sexual behavior. A lot of people enjoy like some level of these things. But then this is kind of like the end of the spectrum of like having these two things happening together. As part of this, you often see sometimes things like autoerotic asphyxia. That can be dangerous. I'm gonna go back for a minute, but when you limit someone's oxygen, that's where we can get into problems, right? So sometimes like binding people or gagging people can be problematic if you go too far, right? Like, so you have to be really careful to have like mutually agreed upon limits and discussions. In 50 Shades, like I read all the books and, you know, for research, I needed to make sure I knew for the class, right? My partner was like, why are you reading those? I was like, for my class, of course, right? You know, you need to have contracts sometimes, right? Like they have a contract in there of what they like will do or not do, which can sometimes be verbal or written. It can go either way. A very, very common like sexual paraphilia or behavior or kink that we often see. Any other like comments or stories or thoughts or anything? I don't know if I should get stories, but thoughts here. Keep those stories to yourself. So as I said, sometimes restricting people's airflow can be part of this. Some other non-coercive paraphilias that are relatively common. Infantilism. I mentioned the diaper fetish thing. That is one of the like top 20. Like it comes up all the time. Being treated like a baby could go as far as like wearing diapers, having your diaper changed. Really like starts to get into like a blurry line with some of the like pedophilia stuff, but it's consenting between adults is the essence of it. Scatophagia and urolagnia or urophilia, being defecated on or peed on. Okay, those are two of the more common like sexual paraphilias. And again, if you want somebody to do this to you and they want to do it to you, not a problem. But you urinate on your partner without talking to them about it, right? And they freak out and like a panic, right? Like that could be a problem in your relationship, right? So conversations before sex might be good. But water sports or golden showers, the technical name for this. I had a student years ago, I will never forget this, told me this whole story. And the essence, like the bottom line of the story was his girlfriend asked him if he was into water sports. He's like, yeah, I love water sports. Like he was thinking like water skiing and like, you know, like out on a boat, like doing fun things. And she meant this, right? He's all like, yeah, I should have clarified before we moved on. But like water sports or golden showers, these are relatively common behaviors, right? Like along with others. I mean, other fetishes that you've heard of that are common, like any other like thoughts or comments or things that like you know of or kind of hear about? Like you mentioned the infantile one, again, it's up here. Yeah. They're like dirty socks you put in their mouth. Yeah, yeah, right. And again, if both people find it, it's fine. But what happens is like you have somebody who's really into that, and then you get the like common reaction of like, you know, like, oh, and then it causes tension because now you have a partner who can't achieve orgasm because they're not getting their needs met. And then you have the other one who's like desperately like turned off by that. It can create problems within relationships. Or it can be fantastic when you have two people who are like right here, right? And they have those kind of matching needs. All right, I was so excited to find the little flasher guy up there, right? So coercive paraphilias are the ones that are non-consenting. So these are the ones that are against your consent. So you haven't asked someone for consent. They are unable to give consent for whatever reason. One very common one, exhibitionistic disorder, right? People who enjoy exposing themselves to an unsuspecting stranger, like my little guy up here at the top, right? Like with his sign. I was very excited for that animation, probably too excited. But when people do this, it's an unwilling participant. You did not want to see that. You did not ask for that. You didn't give your consent. And oftentimes with these, it is your mortified reaction that they find arousing. So as hard as it is to do, the best thing that you can do if somebody gives you like an obscene phone call or they flash themselves is to just act like it didn't matter in the slightest. Okay? Because when you react and you're disgusted and you're like, oh, what is wrong with you? And you're all worked up about it, they often will masturbate to that reaction later. And that is what is most arousing to them. So the best thing you can do with these things is to just be like, okay, and keep walking, right? Really not the easiest thing to do, right? Did I tell you the San Francisco story? This is my other class. So we were at a conference with a couple of my coworkers. We were at a conference in San Francisco, always San Francisco, those things for me. But we were walking to the conference and it was right around this time of year. And there was a guy on the corner dressed up as Sam. And like, I didn't think anything of it. We were in like mid to late November. And like, we got closer and he flashed us. Like full blown, naked, like, man, I did not ask to see that flash us, right? And like, I remember vividly, she's no longer here anymore, but my coworker at the time was like, oh dear, and kept walking. Like that was the reaction. She was like, oh dear. And I said nothing. I was just like, San Francisco, and like kept walking. Like we were probably very unsatisfying to him because we just didn't react. That people behind us like screamed. That's the reaction that oftentimes someone who's doing this is looking for, that you're disgusted, upset, kind of reaction because you were unwilling. I was an unwilling participant for that person in San Francisco. Another really common one is voyeurism. Okay, so watching people without their consent. And this has become very, very common. Hidden cameras, being recorded and watched all the time in places where you wouldn't suspect it. But engaging in watching somebody either having sex or like getting undressed or changing, trying on clothes, whatever it is without their consent. Looking through bedroom windows, holes in dressing rooms, using video cameras. But again, it's that whole like your mortified reaction of them catching you and you're being upset is often what is so arousing. That's a big component with a lot of this, like wanting that upset, disgusted reaction. But there's some degree of voyeurism that tends to be kind of common, like watching people or like observing people watching like pornography. Might kind of fall a little bit into this, right? Like where you're watching pornography with a partner or erotica with a partner, depending on what you're watching. But this is one of the more common ones as well. Exhibitionism and voyeurism. Probably the most difficult of the coercive paraphilia is very illegal, right? And we'll talk about this more when we get to the next chapter, is pedophilia. So someone who is under the age of 18 is considered a child. Now this gets really blurry when you have people who are like 15 and 18, 15 and 17, 16 and 17. Technically, it can be like statutory issues when you have two people who are under 18 together. But in this case, we're talking about someone who's an adult engaging in some kind of sexual behavior with a child, which is someone under 18. Now, a prepubescent child is under 13, but like still, this is something that has come up a lot, like, right, with like the Epstein files and everything. This has been something that has been like a big thing in the media. But in general, we're talking about someone who is under the age of 18. And because of their age, they're not able to give consent, right? And so they can't agree to a sexual like behavior. We don't tend to pursue this between like a 16 and 17-year-old. But you have a 16 and 18-year-old, it becomes a much bigger issue. The problem is when one is an adult and one is a child. Now we have a whole like law that became a federal law in 1996 called Megan's Law, that whenever someone has been convicted of a sex crime, including pedophilia, they have to be registered on a website where you can see and have public access to that information. This is kind of frightening to do. But if you wanted to, you can. You can go on to Megan's Law website and you can see all of the registered sex offenders around you. Now, I live on a street with an elementary school, so my neighborhood is like very empty with this because there are often restrictions how close you can live to a school if you're a registered sex offender. But like if you put in your address, you can see this and it has a picture of them for life. It has what they did or didn't do, like registered for life. Once you are convicted of this, it stays with you. This could be something like having sex in public, urinating in public, all the way to like being a registered pedophile. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure in California, if it's 3 years or less of an age difference, it's not considered.
Right. Yes. So it depends on the state that you live in. And it's very rarely like followed up with legally if you have two consenting like teenagers. But where it gets tricky is if like one's 15 and one's 18, then all of a sudden it could be a big problem. But yeah, every state has a slightly different like regulation about the difference between like teenagers. But it's not nearly as commonly pursued as like 18 and then someone who's under.
Oh, also, I'm pretty sure this is more recent, but it can prove in a court of law. Like if you're caught having sex in public, it
Yeah.
can prove in a court of law that you were attempting to hide yourself and not trying to get caught. Then it's not considered illegal.
Interesting, right? Yeah, and like I imagine it could get very complicated legally, depending on what you did and where and in front of who. Right? Was there another? Yeah.
Yeah, so my dad runs a business in Death Valley National Park.
Okay.
It's like everybody who works there lives there because it's like so far from the town.
Sure.
And like he will not ever hire anyone who's on the sex offender registry, no matter what the situation is, even if it's like a more innocuous one, like,
Sure.
like repentant, because if they live there, people would be able to look it up before visiting there, and
Yeah.
then they would see like, oh, there's someone on the registry living there, I'm gonna stay somewhere else. So
Yeah.
he just won't do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like that would suck to be on that for the rest of your life.
Right, especially when so it's something like being drunk in public, like you were drunk and you urinate in public could be enough to land you on there. And it would say that, but it's still a criminal offense that you could find on there, which might make it hard to get hired, make it hard to find housing. It might be, a variety of situations and like forever. A lot of discussion about this, like at what point should it be removed? Who should have access to these things? But as it stands right now, you have access to that. Again, it can be frightening to look, but it is public information as of right now. Some very common coercive paraphilias, other than pedophilia. I hate to say that pedophilia is common, but it is one of the top ones. Frauderism, rubbing up against somebody in public. These are much more commonly committed by men than women, like very, very high frequency of men compared to women. But frauderism, typically in like a crowded place, it's a man pulling his penis out and rubbing it up against somebody, against their will and consent, obviously. Zoophilia and necrophilia, animals and people who have passed, right? So these are things that are relatively common. They're some of the most common coercive paraphilias that we have measured. And the wild thing is oftentimes people who have these kind of things end up working in fields that allow it for them, like allow them access, I should say. So someone who's like a mortician, right, it might be more like prone to this. Someone who has a shoe fetish might like end up working somewhere where they sell shoes, right? Like, or foot fetish. We tend to be drawn toward these things. Yeah.
It's funny, it's not, but we've had like a couple discussions about this, like I don't know if you know what furry is.
Yeah.
I hate to bring it up, but like it's just like I feel like a lot of people think that furries are like pedophiles,
Yeah.
like pedophilia, but it's just like I feel like most people don't really understand that they're two different things,
Right.
And I feel like it's just like a lot of not miscommunication, but a lot of like misinformation out there.
Right.
Because like when I talk about like I just mentioned furry, they're like, oh, they're like attracted to animals.
Right.
No, they're not.
Like that you enjoy dressing like an animal, or your identity is around that, but not sexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they become linked, right? And one of my kids went through like a phase of like wanting to be like a furry, like, and wore like ears and a tail and like little gloves, and like the instant assumption is sexuality, right? But they don't have to be connected to each other at all. They could be, right? But they don't have to be. One's more like identity based and one's more like sexuality based. So this is somebody who needs like sexual contact with like some kind of animal in order to get aroused or achieve orgasm, versus that might be identity. Yeah, I'll go back there and then okay.
I got so nervous with mixed furries to say, oh, it's sexual. I hate when people say that.
Yeah,
Because like, I draw a bunch of stuff and I have a persona. God forbid I mention that I have a persona.
right.
Because like, when I tell my family like, you're a furry? You have a persona? I'm not, like, no.
Right.
It's so.
It is, but the instant assumption is that they're connected, right? And it doesn't, it can be, it's like one person who ruins it for everybody probably, right? It's just- Yeah, well, and that was my daughter's thing, was all like, I just think it's really cute. Like, we went to see Wicked, because we were ready to see the next one this weekend, and my daughter was like, I'm gonna wear my tail, but I don't want people to think it's like a sexual thing.
Right.
And I was like, well, wear your tail if you think it's cute, like, who cares what they think? But like, that's the instant assumption, yeah.
Like, how old was your daughter when people were saying like, oh, it's sexual? It's like,
They're 12.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
12.
That's a crazy thing to talk about a 12-year-old.
12-year-old was like, ew. You know, that was the reaction, which I was like, oh, you're still like, I appreciate that you're still there. Like, her reaction was like, ew. She's like, why would anyone? She's like, I just like the. You know, I mean, then like the innocence of it, right? But that was the instant thought, despite the fact that she's still so. I mean, she's taller than me, but she's still so little. Yeah.
Also, a lot of the times when furries incorporate their hobby into their sexuality, it usually isn't zoophilia. It can also consist of like play acting in
Yeah.
animalistic ways.
Sure.
So, like scratching or like play acting being like a prey and a predator and that sort of thing.
Sure. Which
it's-
doesn't have to be with animals, it's more like that, like you're saying, like a behavior,
Yeah.
like could go with it. And it could be a form of dominance in a way, right? Like kind of like being wild without being an animal, you know? And if your partner's fine with that, like a lot of people like to be like scratched or bitten to some level, it's not an uncommon sexual behavior. As long as it's consensual and you're both into it, like nothing wrong with that. But it does tend to have that really wild stereotype, yeah.
I like to say that most zoophiles are, like most of them are furries, but not all furries are zoophiles.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
yeah.
And it's often, oh, don't change the side, it's often a young man who doesn't have access to a human sexual partner. That's the like, I want to say the stereotype, but it is also like the most common way that it presents.
I think like another aspect that apparently like I've seen from someone else that perhaps like one of the reasons why some people go to furries is because it's also a very fear friendly space because typically like in the past they may have said like, oh, I'm not gay, I'm just really into werewolves.
Yeah, but what's the correlation there, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
There is, yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, but I do think like there is like at least like some relationship between like self and queerness.
I mean, so queerness, so
Like
to
not
be
like
queer, to like, just to take queer, like the word.
like not heterosexual.
Yeah, but like, I think where the like, kind of the match comes is queer just means like you're not kind of, like, if you take that word and kind of follow its root back, it's just to be different, right? And so more than like a gay space or like a homosexual space, it was just like a different space to occupy. Because there's not like a higher correlation necessarily between like furry behavior and like the queer community. Like you see it almost equally in like across communities. Was that a?
Oh, yeah, they did like a survey in Seattle, which is like a very big. Like,
Yeah.
furries gather, especially because they have like a furry convention.
They have a big convention there, yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
But only 20% of the furries in the survey identified as schizophrenic.
Interesting, yeah, and like one little pocket, right, but with a pocket that draws a lot of people, right, so it's tricky, right, I mean, they can be related, I like the way you said it, right, like just they might be more likely, but it doesn't mean you have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I meant to like.
Sure.
Yeah, like perhaps like one of the reasons why like a pretty good factor of everyone and why like a lot like from what I experienced, like a lot of the furry community is typically of queer people. Like that could be one of the reasons why. Like
Sure, it could be, but it doesn't have to be.
it doesn't have to be. Some people just like being a dog.
Mhm.
Some people just like see themselves as a dog.
And they're like wearing a little tail and ears, right?
Yeah.
My daughter looks very cute with her tail and ears, and they match. So then she likes that, right? They're rainbow and they match, right? Or she's like, is like the shyest person in the world with like the loudest clothing I've ever. Yeah. Right.
It's like, like, sometimes it looks like
Yeah.
this couple like wants to have this on a dog.
Mhm.
Like treatment on a thing like that. So
Sure.
so people like being older like this sometimes
Yeah.
he like adds stuff together and it's just not.
And it could be that there's a sexual component to that, but it doesn't happen, right? Like it's, yeah, I don't think things like, TikTok and the media always do those communities like a favor, right? And it's always like the one or two little examples that get a lot of attention that kind of fuel it. With all of these, if they require treatment, it might not require treatment, right? Again, if your partner's good with it, you're good with it, treatment's not needed. But when it is like one of those coercive ones, there's often like things that can be done to help eliminate them. One of the common ones with like exhibitionism and frauderism and voyeurism is shame aversion, where you make someone feel like bad and have strong feelings of shame in order to like stop it. So it could literally be laughing at someone and like shaming them for exposing themselves to make them feel like shame around it so they stop doing it. Or reconditioning. A lot of conditioning is involved with preferences and fetishes. Okay, so like if you wanted to get rid of something, you kind of remove the association of pleasure or joy from it, and that can take it away and kind of help you to eliminate that behavior. Or there's kind of the old thought of like flooding, where it's like you do it so much that it loses its power. And that's another way you can do it, but it's not the most successful. Orgasmic
Yeah.
conditioning is much more.
Yeah, and then, yeah, usually if you try flooding, it's typically just, I feel like that would typically just end it with like them going deeper into the
It could.
addiction.
It can make it stronger. Or it could lessen it, but sometimes have consequences. It's like the old like 80s like idea of like, I'm gonna have you smoke a carton of cigarettes so you never want to smoke. Right? But like what damage did you do in having them smoke a carton of cigarettes? Yeah.
Are there any examples of like someone going to shame aversion therapy, but they're actually like into the shame?
Yeah.
It just makes it worse.
You could be into the shame and it would make it worse, right? Like I want you to laugh at me and like getting off on the laughing or the shame piece of it. Yeah, you could, if you hid that well, that could be like a very happy thing for you when it was meant to be something that averted you away from it. Sure. One other thing that this chapter sometimes talks about, sex addiction. Again, something that is very complicated because how much is too much, right? And I imagine each one of you would have a different, like a different definition of what is too much, right? Is once a day too much? 2 times a day? 3 times a day? Like, how much is too much? And that's going to be different from person to person. Oftentimes, when you are in a new relationship, if you're sexual with each other, it might be a lot in the beginning and then it kind of tapers over time. But different partners might have different sex drives, and that can be a problem. What if one partner wants it like every day and the other is like once a month is good for me, right? You might have to find a compromise, or one of you is kind of unhappier than the other. It leads to like cheating behavior sometimes, or a lot of masturbating kind of behavior to fill in the gaps. The idea here is this is somebody who like is never able to be satisfied by sex. So like you have sex and you need more, or it doesn't like fill that hole and you're like thinking about it. Maybe you like, no matter what you do, you can't seem to like feel satiated or satisfied. But again, like defining what is normal is not an easy thing to do. And like this is all over the place. And when people are younger, having sex more often tends to be more frequent and acceptable. And when they're older, it tends to be less acceptable, but that depends on the person. Yeah.
There's this really good show, called Fleabag, which is about.
Fleabag? Uh-huh.
And, like, the way that it's depicted, like, she doesn't, like, she doesn't have, like, sex, like, daily or anything. But
Yeah.
her preoccupation on
Thinking about it, right?
and, like, the amount or like the amount of time she spends thinking about it,
Yeah.
trying to have sex,
Sure.
ends up negatively affecting her personal relationships and her executive function.
Yeah, because it could be that more than like just the physical act.
Impure, impure. Brother man.
All right. But again, making fun of that like can be a very big struggle for people. But like the whole idea there, again, some little like nuggets of things in there that are good, like the prayer, like the group therapy, like and like any type of group therapy, this can get complicated. When you get a group of people together all dealing with the same thing, boundaries are really important, right? Like they all kind of start to get heated. In group therapy for like anger management, people get angry and heated really quickly in that. So setting those boundaries, talking about things like masturbating as like a sensitive alternative, maybe sometimes fear tactics with like STIs and the prevalence of that if you're not careful. But this is something that, again, can be complicated for people on even just a lesser level, as I mentioned, when you and your partner have different sex drives, right? That can be something that's hard for people to navigate, right? And like kind of exploring other options. And then there are people who are open about being like sex addicts and the struggles that they've had with it, shows about it. It is something that sometimes comes up as part of this chapter. So one more thing to kind of mention before we wrap up chapter 16. All right. The clip is playing again in the background here. Well, I don't want you to get right. Any other like comments or thoughts, questions, anything else from this chapter? Anything else at all? So a few things in common. Then the next chapter has a couple of things like overlapping threads with consent. A lot of things related to consent. Pedophilia comes up in this chapter again as well with like sexual abuse of children. But what I think what I want to do is I'm going to start this next time. This can be a topic that obviously has some information in it that can be a little bit hard for people. So just as like a warning, like we'll keep it very on the surface, but we will talk about the different types of rape, a little bit about sexual abuse of children and pedophilia, focusing at the end a little bit on sexual harassment and intimate partner violence. But obviously, like, again, a sensitive topic, but be very mindful of that as we go through it. So I think what I'll do, I'll pick up with this when I see you on Wednesday, just as a like heads up. But we'll go through this. And then after that, we have one more chapter, which is selling sex, where we get to like pornography and prostitution and a few things there. So I'll stop there for today. Drive safe and be safe out in, looks like it's raining again. So be safe out there, and I'll see you all. I'll see you all on Wednesday. Bye.
Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you. Excellent.
I'd love to. Yes, bro, I mean, it's.
I apologize. That's what I'm saying. Catch you up.
I've lost like 5